Lightning Spear was the best build in the game back in 0.2. Then, GGG hit it with the triple nerf-hammer. Frenzy charges became a pain to generate. Its AoE got obliterated, and its single-target damage interactions were nerfed to the ground. But now, my friends, the Oracle has arrived, and it solves all of these problems with ease, making Lightning Spear great once again. So, let's see how we solve it, shall we? To make Lightning Spear not suck complete donkey balls, we first need to generate frenzy charges, allowing it to split and actually do some proper AoE damage. We used to be able to just slot Sniper's Mark into our cock, and it was solved. But now we need to actually think before solving this annoying problem. The way I've decided to solve it is via Armor Break, because by using Armor Break 3, we can gain endurance charges as we break armor. We then transform these endurance charges into frenzy charges, and it's solved. But the question is, how do we actually break enemy armor? Well, first we have this lovely skill, Detonate Dead. This actually deals physical damage, so much in fact that it can nearly sustain our frenzy charges by itself. But to truly seal the deal, we're incorporating Armor Break into our Lightning Spear as well. Unfortunately though, this skill deals no fucking physical damage at all, but we can easily stack chaos damage instead. And with chaos damage, we can use UUL's Embrace, allowing us to instantly break armor. And now, the frenzy charge generation is solved. Alright, and what about the AoE then? Well, ever since the Volt Gem got reworked, the AoE of Lightning Spear has been mid at best. To solve this, I'm incorporating Arc and going Spell Damage Hybrid. In fact, when mapping, it's Arc doing most of the clearing in combination with Detonate Dead. We just need to make sure to trigger our cock as much as possible, and the clear solves itself. This also means that you don't actually need that great gear, since you can just rely more on the cock spell damage. Finally, the single target. Lightning Spear is absolutely atrocious when it comes to single target, but a skill that is not atrocious for single target is Glacial Lance. As long as we generate frenzy charges, we can use this to freeze enemies and burst them down. This skill is so good at bossing, in fact, that with just a few changes to the build, you can make it one of the best bosses in the game. That's what I've been doing while farming Uber Arbiter. You just freeze the boss, one-shot him, and move on. But that will require some build changes that we'll discuss later after we've discussed all of the gems and gear. I'd also like to mention that the build is indeed budget viable, but my current gear is pretty bonkers. We'll discuss the changes needed to play it on a budget as well. First though, a quick word from today's sponsor, Archeron, made by Bonfire Studios. This is a PvP team game where you hop on with your friends or randoms, farm, loot, and create your build, and then fight off the other enemy teams in PvP combat. I've been following this game for months now, and they finally released an open demo, concluding March 2nd. I've been playing the living shit out of it, and while everything was not included in the demo, what was shown has been some proper good fun. There's a bunch of ways to build your character, lots of different weapon styles and builds, making each game unique. But what I enjoyed the most is definitely the combat. Despite having some minor performance issues, the combat was silky smooth and, most importantly, fun. This is a game I can see myself playing long time, and if you're late to the party and the demo has concluded, you can just sign up for the closed beta to keep playing it as well. Just use the link in the description wishlist and follow the game so you can stay up to date and join me in the upcoming beta. Alright, let's check out the gems now. And first out is Lightning Spear. Currently, I'm relying heavily on cast on crit and arc for clear, so I'm mainly using Lightning Spear to trigger cast on crit. I do, however, use Rakiatas for damage and Oisin to generate mana. Because remember, this skill deals no physical damage. I then have Armor Break and UUL's Embrace for frenzy generation, and then Fork for more AoE. If you want more damage, then you can swap out Fork for elemental armament. And if you can't afford UL's Embrace, then you'd grab a Gain as extra physical damage roll on your weapon to break armor via physical damage instead. And if you can't afford Racchiata, then just slot in more of these damage gems. Next up is Glacial Lance. When mapping, we're throwing this out on rares and bosses. It will instantly freeze rares and shit, which will grant us Bater's Vengeance. It will drain your mana though, so you'll have to alternate between Lightning Spears and Glacial Lance. And if you're doing Pinnacle boss farming, then you just move Oisin over to Glacial Lance. And don't worry, I'll have different versions in the planner, so you won't have to keep all of this in your little peanut brain. We then have Longshot for damage and Garakans, which is the gem I'd prioritize first if you're broke due to its massive damage boost, elemental armament, and rapid attacks. I have both of these skills in both weapon sets, and when doing bosses, I just swap to weapon set 2 for maximum damage and freeze buildup. After that, we go for charge regulation. I use this in both weapon sets. You know how we obtain frenzy charges, but what about the other charges? Well, since we have resonance, Sniper's Mark generates power charges for us whenever we use it. But we're also gaining frenzy charges via Valakos that are transformed into power charges in case you don't want to use Sniper's Mark when mapping. We also have Breath of the Mountains that will grant us endurance charges. And the reason this works is because we have Catalysis transforming physical damage into lightning, cold, and fire. And hey, will you look at that? Both of these charms rely on taking elemental damage to trigger. Next, we have Mana Remnants. Now I have a lot of Spirit. In fact, I usually have more Spirit, but I'm currently using the Covenant because I'm lacking a Gain as physical roll and can't leech life otherwise. But anyway, if you're lacking Spirit, then this is the first gem to go. I only have this in set 1, and I'm using it only so that I can sustain mana when my cast on crit is going off like crazy. And speaking of cast on crit, here it is again. Detonate Dead deals massive amounts of damage in tough content when enemies have a bunch of life. It also breaks armor for frenzy charges, and then we focus on our arc, where Sione's Temper is what grants it the massive, clear, and boundless energy for additional triggers. I'm only using this in set 1, as it's only really used for clearing. Next up is Sniper's Mark. When mapping, I use it for the power charge it generates and for doing extra damage on bosses. When farming Pinnacle bosses, though, you would remove Resonance and use this to generate frenzy charges, because you definitely need those if you want to nuke down Ubers with Glacial Lance. It's shit without them. I then have Mark for Death to break boss armor, Second Wind to use it twice, Charged Mark to ensure bosses are shocked, and Mark of Siphoning for extra leash. Next, we have our Rage combo. We will be Rage stacking, as we'll gain both multiplicative attack damage and spell damage from it. To generate Rage, we have Eternal Rage, and to boost it, we have Berserk. If you can afford Utrids, then you'd slot it in here, but it's not mandatory. Then, to generate lightning infusions when mapping, we have Siphon Elements, as we want that large chunk of extra damage for our arc when it's lightning infused. And since I'm only using cast on crit in set 1, I do the same with Siphon Elements. And finally, Trinity and Elemental Conflux for weapon, set 2 for extra damage. Alright, now on to an important question. How in the living fuck am I getting all of this spirit? I mean 400 spirit when I swap my armor. That's a lot. Indeed. You want to get spirit on your helmet, chest, and amulet, not only because we need spirit, but we're also boosting our damage when combining it with the threaded light focus. Once you have spirit on your gear, you just slap on some grand spectrums and it's solved. I also have a time-lost diamond with spirit, but that shit's expensive and not needed. If you can afford one though, then go for it. Worst case, you just remove mana remnants, charge regulation, and you're done. And worst case, you slot in spirit runes in your weapon or grab spirit reservation efficiency desecrations. There's lots of ways to solve it. Alright, onto the gear. First we have the most important item of all, Crown of Eyes. This is how we double dip via spell damage, having it grant both spell damage for our arc and attack damage for our spear skills. You want to have it corrupted with as much spirit as you can afford. For chest, this one's great, except for the fact that I'm playing Chaos Inoculation and don't need the Chaos res. When it comes to the rings, you want to grab unset rings, 1 or 2 depending on how many skills you're using. Then, go for attack damage, resistances, and item rarity. You also need to go for leech on one of them. Also insanely important, you must grab a life regeneration roll somewhere. It doesn't matter how much life regen it is, but if you don't have it, you'll kill yourself from Berserk and the Guatemala. Whatever the fuck rune, increasing sprinting speed while eating your max life. And speaking of movement speed, when it comes to boots, these are near perfect. After that, go for Essentia Sanguis, so you can leech energy shield and slap on a headhunter with a resistance corrupt because they're both cheap and broken. Next, grab an amulet with spirit and projectile skills, then fill out with anything you need, and anoint the mystical rage node as to generate spell damage from rage. Finally, the weapon. Now make no mistake, this is an insane fucking weapon. But you don't need anything close to this. For mapping, this is perfect, as we want the projectile skill ranks Onslaught and Crit. But you would also be fine having just the projectile ranks to boost arc, and then just go for as much damage as possible. The crit, however, is more important when bossing, but there you don't need projectile ranks or onslaught, so you can save a lot of currency there as well. Just remember, projectile ranks are important when mapping using weapons set 1, and for bossing, we just want as much damage and crit as possible in weapons set 2, and you will be fine. And speaking of bossing, when pinnacle farming, I usually swap out Essentia and Headhunter for Sine Equo and Soul Tether for more damage and freeze. Now when it comes to the charms, we have Valakos and Breath of the Mountains to generate charges, and basically any useful rite of passage. I also have no use for a life flask, so I just slotted in 2 Laviangas with Wastegate. I don't think they both work at once, but who gives a shit? If you want to test it out for yourself, let me know what you find. Great job, friends. Gems and gear complete. Only the passive tree remains, and then I'll teach you bunch of dummies how to actually play the build. Firstly, we have the Ascendancy. To play this build, I suppose you could also go with Blood Mage or something, but Oracle is by far the best. We have the Lesser Harm for a massive defensive layer and Inevitable Critical for 100% crit, both increasing our damage and granting us more cocks. We then go for the Unseen Path and Entwined Realities as per usual. First, we have our nodes double dipping via Crown of Eyes, followed by heading down to grab some additional crit damage for our bossing weapon set. Next we head on back, grab the maximum rage nodes along with this jewel. I fucking hate being stunned and frozen, so I'm getting quite a bit of thresholds here. Then we head on over here to grab a lovely energy shield cluster, more spirit, and the Wild Surge incantation node, so we can grab additional energy shield along with boosting our cast on crit here. And these are only needed in weapon set 1 if you're not using cast on crit in both weapon sets. Either way, move over here and start grabbing some jewels. We have our Grand Spectrum jewels for extra spirit, some energy shield nodes, and the Heroic Tragedy jewel. I'm using this to transform rage into energy shield. To do this, all you need to care about is getting one where it says Varana here. The rest is not important. Alright, keep moving on and grab some energy shield, any decent heart of the well diamond, and chaos inoculation so that we can get all of these lovely nodes. Heavy Frost is probably the most important one, as we have our Rakiata's gem in Lightning Spear and not in Glacial Lance. Using this, though, allows us to ignore elemental resistances for Glacial Lance as well, once it freezes. Then we head on over here to grab an Against the Darkness jewel. This is the ideal one, but it's expensive as hell. The second best one would be having one with just spirit on it, and the third best would be basically any good damage mods. And we want it here because we have just massive amounts of great nodes to grab, along with resonance to generate our frenzy charges and a crit cluster. Finally, we go down here so that we may grab some attack speed and damage, the former for weapon set 1, along with catalysis so that we may generate all the different charges, and finally, another crit cluster for weapon set 2. And with that, we're done with this shit. Let's check out some gameplay and how to play the build now, shall we? Mapping is easy peasy. For most of the content, you're just sprinting, pressing lightning spear, and sprinting. If you're doing hard content though, then it's definitely worth it to weave in some glacial lances. Because by doing this, you're getting the Bater's Vengeance buff as soon as you freeze an enemy, for more than 100% damage gained as cold. You can also use Sniper's Mark every now and then if you want, to ensure you get the extra crit chance from charged regulation. But usually, that's solved via our charms. Then when you run into a boss, you just mark him, spam Glacial Lance until you run out of mana, shoot him with a lightning spear or two to regenerate mana if he's not already dead, and repeat. And if you want him to die as fast as possible, you obviously swap to weapon set 2 to kill him. Alright, and then finally, we have the pinnacle bossing. For doing King of the Mists, etc., you don't have to swap out shit. Just alternate between using Glacial Lance and Lightning Spear, and he will die eventually. But for doing Arbiter, I always make a few swaps as I want to ensure I don't have to do any mechanics, rather just one-shotting the guy. So this is what I do. First, I need to remove resonance. I have a from nothing diamond I can slot in, so I won't have to change the passive tree and can just remove resonance. Then, I slot in Combat Frenzy along with Scene Equo and Soul Tether. And finally, I move Oisin's Oath to Glacial Lance. Remember, all of this is not really needed, but not having to do any mechanics on this boss is a huge quality of life upgrade. Anyway, once this is complete, you just mark the boss with Sniper's Mark, shoot him with Glacial Lance, and repeat. You'll freeze him pretty much instantly, and he should die. Easy as that. Alright, that's all for this one. If you have any questions, drop them below and I'll gladly ignore them for you. And make sure to check out Archeron, that game's a banger.